Hi, everyone, and welcome once again to the Resilient Lawyer podcast. Today, we are talking to Leander Opperman. He's a former corporate litigation lawyer turned adventurer and law firm strategy catalyst. He leverages his business acumen, legal expertise, and 2 decades of professional development experience to help law firms bridge the gap between strategy and execution. Welcome, Leander. It's nice to have you today.
Thank you very much. It's a privilege to be on your podcast.
Right, thank you. So before we get into our topic for today, I first want to hear more about Leander and how did you shift, from being a corporate or litigation lawyer and then starting your own business, Unlock, if I'm not mistaken?
As you can see there, made sure that everyone can see it. Thanks very much, Marika. I'm going to answer your question by telling you and your viewers and Sonia a story. I thought of a story would be a nice way of introducing who I am. But I want to tell you a story about someone else. His name is Matthew. And about 33 decades ago, he qualified as a lawyer. And he worked really hard to hone his skills as a lawyer. He understood the practice of law really well. But as he moved up into the ranks of his firm and he became a partner, he realized that he was wearing a mask. And that mask, or the imposter syndrome that we've all experienced, was simply because he didn't understand the business of law. He knew very well the practice of law, but as he matured in his organization and progressed, he learned that it's more about the business of law and less about the practice of law. And maybe the two of you have experienced that yourselves. And then he did something. He reinvented himself and he leveraged what I call the power of accountability. He hired a sales coach for a year who taught him sales. And that person, to this day, I know is still Matthew's accountability partner, holding him accountable to do not only the urgent client work, but also the important work.
Hmm.
Now, so the secret is that Matthew is actually Leander. I was just referring to my own story. And that's why I really came upon this discovery. And it's a gift that I'd like to give lawyers to say to them, it doesn't have to be that way anymore. There are people out there who are interested in giving you knowledge. And I say the only person standing between you and learning is yourself. I want to just commend and honor the two of you. This platform that you've created and this valuable proposition that you've created is a perfect place for any of your clients to start. Just by logging into the podcast, they're moving away from the whirlwind of urgent and they're going into doing the important stuff. So well done to the two of you.
Thank you.
Okay, Leandra, if you can maybe just tell us what is the service that is actually provided by Unlock? If I was an attorney now in a law firm and I asked you, what do you do? How can you assist me with strategy?
Such a great question. Thank you. You've heard the saying, work harder, not smarter, right? And lawyers are really good at working hard, make no mistake. But we don't always work that smart. I help my clients move from working harder, not smarter, to working smarter, not harder, working on their firms and not only inside of their firms as operators. So I literally act as an accountability partner. I say, what do you want to do? What do you want to work on? Because I don't for one moment think lawyers who are smart people don't know what to do to build their practices. They know that they must work on client satisfaction and loyalty. They know they need to build the skills of their teams. They know they must work on productivity, getting the hours worth out of the hour. And they also know that, that getting better clients, better paying clients, perhaps some of us, but better quality clients. And those 4 points that I've just mentioned are the strategic objectives. So lawyers know all of that, but there's a difference between knowing and doing. One of my favorite books that I read, a guy called Eric Kruger, the title is Dangerous. He says, if action followed words, we'd all have six packs. But we walk out on the beach in December and why don't I have a six pack? So we know what to do to get those beautiful abs, but we're not taking action. And I'm helping lawyers to take action on what they know they need to do. Make sense?
Makes sense. But how do you actually shift that mindset? I mean, I was also in a law firm and practicing. So we are so focused on billable hours. you want to extract as much out of the day that you can towards your clients. So actually taking time is very difficult. And
Wow.
we've seen it in PMRI as well, moving that mindset. What is your views on that?
It's such an important thing that you're mentioning. Mindset is everything. I say mindset separates the best from the rest. And the two of you have great mindset. You have growth mindsets. And this is why you were able to see that I'm valuable as an advocate. But if I understand that it's not just my billable time that creates today's, because if you think about it, it's not just my billable time that's valuable. I say to my clients, would you agree with me that your billable time can take care of only 1 year's revenues this year? Your non-billable time, if you leverage it, can take care of future revenues. And that's why it's so important for us to say 80% of our work, maybe 90%, 95% of our time can be spent on billable, because we have clients, we must serve them to the best of our abilities. But what about 5% of our time investing in creating future revenue, so that we don't need to work as hard next year? We can start working smarter and start creating next year's revenues. And that's what you do when you leverage billable time, but non-billable time. But you're so correct. It's an absolute mind shift, because we are conditioned to think anything that's not billable is a waste of time. And that's such a myth. In fact, it's a lie. If you think about it, I want to share with you an example from business. Google, which we all know, has a rule. It's a policy written in their conditions of employment. 20% of Google employees' time, 20%, not even 5%, 20% of their time is regarded as experimental time. And guess what? Some of the best products have come from the 20% time, not the coding that they do in the 80% of their day, but 20% of the time. Some of the most wonderful ideas have come up, and I can send you details because I've read numerous books on this. So they understand the value of leveraging that time when the employees are not on the clock. So if Google can get it right, and that's $1 trillion company, market capitalization, why can't we as lawyers say, let me take 1% or 1.5% of my week and spend that on working smarter, not harder, and start building revenues for the future?
Very true. And you know what? We also often say that we know what to do, like you said. You want that abs, you know exactly what to do, but you don't always do it. And we often have the saying that everybody knows that, knowledge is not power. Applied knowledge is power. If
Amen.
you don't apply what you learn, you can't make that impact. So, what's the biggest challenge that you find that firms have in terms of taking action?
It's the billable hour, and we need to avoid thinking about the billable hour. We need to think about the billable hour differently. We need to say that is a revenue model. It's not the only revenue model. You had a very insightful podcast a couple of episodes ago with Scott. And it was so valuable, the insights that he gave there. And he said, why don't we think about different pricing models, different revenue models? And I can tell you, I've seen it at my previous firm. One of my partners was smart enough to say to his client, look, this case is probably going to cost 3 million rand. And he did his homework in advance. So he didn't sell his time. He said to the client, it's 3 million rand. What is the client here? It's fixed. It's a known. But imagine saying to your client, or ask in response to a question by your client, what is it going to cost? Well, how long is a piece of string? It'll be as long as I continue billing my hours. And what he did was so smart. He negotiated a fee with the advocate. He then decided what is going to be a reasonable fee, regardless of how long the case takes. And the client said, let's do it. And they budgeted for it. So we need to start thinking like business people. How do you budget for a lawyer who's going to send you an invoice every month? And 1 month, it's going to be 100,000 rand, and this month it's going to be 50. You can't budget. You can't work that way. So it's just one of the ways is to say, let's fix a fee. I know there's an elephant in the room. It's called taxation. But it doesn't mean that your file can't be sent to a cost consultant and the work that you've done, then a bill of costs drafted. But you don't have to send your client these itemized bills, etc., etc. If you've agreed that this is the fee and the client sees value, because that's the key. Think value, profits follow. But we think, no, there's value in sending a client a 5-page invoice. There isn't. The client only wants the outcome. They want it fast and they want good service. That's all they want. And if you can agree with them in advance, that's what I think we should start avoiding and start really thinking out the box. And lawyers are smart. I don't accept it if a lawyer tells me we're not creative. We are all creative. We're beautifully created in the image of the greatest creator on earth. And I want to challenge lawyers to start thinking creatively, not creatively as in the creative accounting that some people often fall into the trap. I'm not referring to that creativity. I'm referring to thinking out the box and thinking about what will my client value, and then crafting a proposition and a revenue model that meets that value, that need for value.
Leander, I think you touched on something which we've discussed on this podcast before, and it's obviously very much the view of PMRI as well. It's cornerstone of what we do, is that the technical legal training is not enough anymore. We strongly believe that there are so many other skills needed today for any legal practitioner to really excel. Now, you're looking at the business side of that, but a lot of them will argue, or a lot of attorneys will say, but we're a profession. We're not businessmen. What did you say to that?
It's a perfect question, and I think there's a perfect answer. If I said to you that your law firm, you argue it's a profession, I want to say I think the advocate's profession is a profession, if you think about it. But law firms, go and look at the typical business down the road. Let's look at the components of that business. You have sales and marketing under the umbrella of business development. You have human resources. You have operations. You have finance and administration. Now look at the typical law firm. Do you have someone who's responsible for the finances, and the office manager, perhaps that's admin, okay, and recruiting new candidate attorneys, new lawyers to your firm? That's human resources. And operations, well, that's delivering the service to clients. And sales and marketing, I mean, why else would you have a golf day if that's not your attempt at doing business development? And that's the go-to. And I'm not suggesting that's the answer. But what I'm saying is if we start thinking of our law firms as legit businesses, and I know very few businesses who are successful if they don't move away from only the operations side, but also look at the strategic side. Where is my business at the moment? Why is it here? Where do I want it to be in 5 years from now? How will I get there? And let's reverse engineer. And what is something that I need to do tomorrow for that dream or that vision of mine to become true? We talk about these things, right? It's called strategic planning. But it's almost like a swear word. We say it at the beginning of the year and everyone goes, oh, and I know why people are so exasperated when they hear it, because it's the same things we talk about every single year. It's ideas versus taking action. Take one of the ideas from this year's strategy agenda and say, forget all the others. We're just going to focus on implementing this. People will come to your strategic planning meetings with a different attitude, because they'll say, it's not the same old, same old. So our law firms really are businesses, Sonia, if we think about it carefully. And I think the only reason why we say we're not businesses is because we understand that business skills are needed to run businesses profitably and to develop them. And lawyers have access to those skills. Your podcast is a brilliant place because you can work on mindfulness, wellness, awareness. Those are critical things that, for example, an HR department would focus on and would pay a lot of attention, because it's your most productive assets are your people, your team players. And that's why I value the work that you do, because you're investing in the most productive asset of any business, which is the people.
Awesome, thank you. So Leander, we spoke about earlier the billable hour. Do you think that is one of the biggest barriers to take a strategic approach?
It's the second most, it's the second
Yeah.
highest hurdle. The first one is mindset, as I've alluded to earlier.
Yes, yes.
And we impose mindsets on ourselves. Oh, my dad was like this, and his dad was like this, so hence, ergo, I'm also like this. My dad thought differently about finance the way I do. He didn't like finance. I honor him for who he was. He's the most patient person. And I told my wife, if I have 25% of the patience that my dad had with my mom over the course of their 50-year marriage, you'll be the happiest lady on earth. But there was something that I was curious about, how he reacted to finances, and it was just a lack of skills. And so I said, I'm going to read a book. I'm going to attend an online course at UCT. I'm going to study. I'm going to make it my job to understand finance. So it's just that mindset of saying, you know what, I don't have to know everything, but I can go outside of my field and just learn something next door to my field, because the greatest ideas I've learned are not in our own minds or even in our own industry. It's just outside of our industries, and we can learn from the best companies in the world and apply those principles. And that's why mindset is the number one for me. That's the first thing I check. And I've become quite good at seeing whether someone has the mindset to then implement a business strategy. The billable hour is the second challenge, and I have spoken about that now earlier, but it's really mindset and the billable hour that's holding us back.
Yes.
And Leander, if I may ask you, the execution part, the part where we actually have the abs on the beach, how does Unlock actually assist partners? Because we all have that good intentions. The meeting is in the beginning of the year, but by March, April, everyone's forgotten about it. And then you actually start feeling a bit anxious that you didn't do any of the strategies that you planned. So you just avoid it. We all do that. And then the more you avoid it, the less it gets done. So how can you assist law firms out there to actually stay on it?
You'll see my face lit up, because this is the part that excites me. I know excellent business coaches. I know excellent mindfulness coaches. I have a coach. I have two mentors. But what I've learned is that the magic doesn't happen only in the session. It happens between the sessions. And what happens, and Sonia, you and I over lunch the other day spoke about that. We start resenting these very valuable coaching sessions because this happened in between. If you can see my hand, it's dropping, right? And that's where the accountability comes in. Accountability picks that curve up and ensure that there's consistent effort, small incremental actions. That's tautologist, sorry. Incremental actions that I hold partners and lawyers accountable to take in between the sessions. I say, tell me who your coach is, and I'll work with that person and I'll enhance that person's coaching because they're doing a great job. But then life happens, the whirlwind of practice pulls you down, and then you start feeling resentful or guilty, and you cancel the coaching session. And it's not the coaching session that's the problem, it's what happened in between. How we do it, I call it the power trio. So first and foremost, there has to be human connection. And so they're speaking with a human, they're speaking with someone who understands their pain deeply. For 22 years, I was in the trenches, going through the same feelings of guilt between coaching sessions, the same feelings of exasperation after strategy planning sessions. The second part that I do is I have an extremely bright co-founder in my second business called the Countertrack. And Riyad is a mechatronic engineer, and he loves building things. He worked at Discovery for 8 years. This kid is really smart. You should have had him on the podcast today. I'd call him a kid because he's about 20 years younger than I am, but he's a very mature and smart guy. And what we've done is we've leveraged AI to help our clients to craft a strategy, a customized strategy, focusing on all 4 of the strategic objectives that I mentioned earlier, in 1 hour on 1 page. And that is all we focus on. And the third aspect is because I know that my colleagues, lawyers, are extremely tech averse, and I'm holding up my phone here, right? So this is about as tech as I went before my reinvention. Because I understand their pain and I know that they hate new tech and they hate new software. Just don't tell an attorney. Just let me do my work. Don't tell me about a new software that you want me to use. We've leveraged a very low tech solution. And I say to people, I can hold you accountable with a human connection and the AI that we're helping, we're leveraging. And if you can send me an emoji after you've taken an action, you can use our software on WhatsApp.
That's
Makes
impressive.
sense?
That's
The power trio.
That's amazing. Thank you so much, Leander. This is really, an insightful discussion, and I think there's quite a lot still that one can learn and actually branch out into. But if you could leave our listeners with one thought today, what would that be?
It would be that execution beats ideas every time. Every single time. We have to move from the next big idea or the next book I read. I love reading. I'm reading 5 books at any given moment. But then I take one idea from that book and I hold myself accountable to execute that consistently until it's a habit. So I really want to challenge and encourage the viewers and the listeners to say, think of one strategic action that you can either build your skill in something, and that's also the EQ skills, not just the IQ. So it's not writing another article, perhaps, but watching one of your previous podcasts is building their EQ. Or think about how you can really focus on improving your productivity. And if you want to reach out to me, I have a couple of hacks that I call them that I can share with you. Really scheduling your priorities instead of having a to-do list. Or how can I listen to a client to enhance the loyalty? So meaning, instead of going to a client and telling them how great I am or reporting to them on the portfolio of matters, say to them, I actually want to just listen to you today and understand your business a bit better. Immediately, the client feels that this is a trusted advisor who wants to understand my challenges. Or lastly, how can I start looking in the right places for those better clients that I want? Take one strategic action, read a book, listen to a podcast, just step out of the whirlwind of urgent for 15 minutes once this week, and you would already be moving from idea into action.
Very important. Thank you, Leander. And if people want to, start changing, either their practice or their firm, and this is the year that they want to do it, but they need that accountability partner, how can they get hold of you? Where can they find you?
The reason why I registered this name and this logo as a trademark with my old firm and the reason why I spelt it the way it does is if you go and Google UNLOK, as in the incorrect spelling, you'll see me pretty high up on the search engine. That's why I didn't spell it with a C, so it was intentional.
Oh.
If they Google Unlock spelt with a K, consulting, that's as quickly as I can guide them to reaching out to me. I'll also leave my contact number and obviously my link. I'm on LinkedIn as well, but I guess that's the easiest way. Make it easy for lawyers to help, make it easy for people to get hold of you instead of rambling on with a very long email address. UNLOK.
Very strategic of you. All right. Thank you so much, Leander. It was great having you, and it will be nice again to chat to you at some point, maybe going into specific topics in terms of strategy, but we can leave that for a later stage. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you also to everybody that is watching and also listening on Spotify. We look forward to seeing again in the next episode.